At 11:43 p.m., a knock at my door changed everything. I wasn't ready. I wasn't even dressed properly, and I certainly didn't expect it to be him. My quiet neighbor, with tired eyes and hands that looked like they carried 1,000 stories. What happened next unraveled a part of me I thought had long been tucked away. Before we dive in, tell me, what city are you watching from right now? I'm always amazed at how far stories travel. Now let's begin. It had been one of those quiet nights that almost felt staged, too still, too perfect. My little house sat at the end of our cul-de-sac, lights off, except for the warm amber glow from the lamp in the corner of my living room. I was curled up on my couch in my favorite Warren robe, glass of Cabernet nearly forgotten in my hand, flipping through a photo album I hadn't opened in years. There's something about photos of your kids when they were young that hits you differently once the house goes quiet. You start to remember things like the sound of their feet on the stairs, the smell of pancake syrup on Saturday mornings, and you wonder where that time went, where you went. That's where I was when I heard the knock. Not a pounding, just a knock. Soft, hesitant. I glanced at the clock. 11:43 p.m. It was too late for deliveries, too late for casual visitors. My heart jumped just a little, more from curiosity than fear. I stood up, tightened my robe, and padded to the door. Didn't even bother turning on the porch light. I opened the door slowly, my eyes adjusting to the dim porch light from across the street. It was him, James, my neighbor from 2 doors down. Divorced, quiet, never had visitors. We'd shared the occasional nod across our lawns, maybe a short hey when pulling trash bins to the curb. Nothing more. His eyes were tired. He was holding something in his hand. Looked like a small toolbox, and his flannel shirt was soaked at the collar like he'd been sweating or maybe crying. I couldn't tell which. Hey, he said almost too softly. I'm sorry it's late. I wasn't sure if I should knock. I blinked at him, the wine still humming in my veins. Everything. He shifted on his feet. Not really, there was a leak in my place. Pipe burst. Water everywhere. I tried calling my brother, but he's out of town. Didn't know who else to ask. I hesitated, then stepped aside. Come in. Let me see if I have anything that might help. He walked in carefully, like he was trying not to step on anything sacred. I noticed the way he looked around, like he was surprised at how lived in my home looked. Photos on the walls, candles on the table, a blanket folded just so on the couch. I can get you some towels, I offered, heading toward the hallway linen closet. He followed at a respectful distance, still holding that little toolbox. It was a ticket to something he didn't quite believe in. You okay? I asked over my shoulder, more instinct than anything else. He paused. Yeah, I didn't think I'd actually knock. I almost didn't. Something in his voice pulled me back. I turned to face him. There was a pause, one of those silences that says more than it should. I'm sorry, he said. I know this is weird. It's not, I replied. Well, maybe a little, but not in a bad way. He smiled faintly. You always seem calm, like your house is this quiet place I wish I had. I handed him the towels. It's quieter than I'd like most days. His eyes met mine then, and it hit me. He wasn't just here because of a leak. Not really. This was about something else. Something he didn't have words for yet, or maybe something he couldn't say without sounding foolish. You want to sit for a minute? I asked, motioning to the couch. He hesitated, then nodded just for a minute. I poured him a glass of water and sat across from him. The distance between us felt both huge and not enough. We talked at first about the leak, then about the neighborhood, and then surprisingly about ourselves. James told me how long he'd lived alone since his divorce, that he hadn't meant to stay in that house for more than a year, and now it had been 8, that he sometimes sat in the garage just to feel less alone. And I told him things I hadn't meant to share either, about my grown kids and how distant they seemed lately, about how I hadn't been touched in any meaningful way since my ex remarried. And the last date I went on asked if I was still adventurous at my age. We laughed at that. Not the hearty kind, the tired kind. Then the silence came again. He looked at me, his voice barely above a whisper. I almost turned around halfway up your driveway. Why didn't you? He shrugged. I don't know. I guess I just wanted to be near someone who didn't make me feel like a problem. There it was again, that aching honesty that only shows up when the world is asleep. I nodded slowly. I get that. He leaned back, eyes closing for a moment, like he was letting the quiet wash over him. You ever wonder if maybe we're all just walking around pretending we're okay until someone notices we're not? I didn't answer right away. I just watched him. The way his hands trembled slightly, how he looked older up close, but somehow more fragile too. And something about that made me want to protect him and maybe let myself be seen too. I finally said, I wonder that all the time. We sat like that for a long while. No noise but the soft hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the house settling. He didn't make a move, didn't try anything. And yet something shifted in that space between us. It wasn't about romance. Not yet. It wasn't about loneliness. Not only. It was about two people. Two grown, scared, beautifully worn people, accidentally finding each other in the middle of a sleepless night. I didn't know what would happen next. But for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid of the question. The morning light crept in slow, brushing across the hardwood floors and the empty wine glass. I'd forgotten to put away. I stood in the kitchen barefoot, hands wrapped around a coffee mug, watching the steam curl up into the quiet. James had left just before, too. We didn't hug. We didn't touch. But something stayed. Not his presence exactly, but the shape of him. His voice, his eyes, that half confession he didn't quite finish. You ever wonder if maybe we're all just walking around pretending we're okay until someone notices we're not? I hadn't slept after he left. Not because I was unsettled. Quite the opposite. My body felt still for the first time in months, like someone had opened a window in a room I didn't realize was suffocating me. And yet, I'd also felt completely unprepared. This wasn't the kind of feeling that gets folded up neatly and put away for later. This wasn't just about helping a neighbor with a broken pipe. Something deeper had stirred, and I couldn't unisher it. The next few days passed in their usual rhythm. I grocery shopped. I answered emails from my daughter that sounded more like calendar updates than real conversation. I half-heartedly cleaned the guest room. But every evening, right around the time the sun dipped behind the neighbor's oak tree, I found myself looking out the Kier window, wondering if I'd see him again. James didn't knock. Not that night. Not the next. But on Thursday, just after sunset, I saw him walking his dog, an old Labrador named Gus. He glanced up, saw me standing by the window, and offered a small, almost guilty wave. I opened the door before I could think twice. "Hey," I called gently. He stopped on the sidewalk, a little surprised, and raised a hand. "Hey, sorry, I wasn't going to bother you. You're not bothering me?" I smiled, tugging my sweater tighter around my waist. "Want to come in for a bit?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Let me drop Gus. Off. He gets cranky when he's not fed on time." 15 minutes later, he was back, hands clean, shirt dry this time, and eyes a little less weighed down. We sat on the porch, a cool breeze rustling the wind chimes that had been silent all summer. "I've been thinking," he said after a long moment, "about the other night." I looked over at him. He wasn't looking at me, just down at his hands. I wasn't lying about the leak. That happened, but I didn't really need help with it. I said nothing, just waited. I needed someone to talk to, someone who wouldn't look at me like I was broken, for needing that. "You didn't seem broken to me." He looked at me then. I think that's why I came back. A soft flush warmed my cheeks, and I wasn't sure if it was his words or the memory of how he'd looked in my living room. Quiet, vulnerable, completely unguarded. "I think we've all been there," I said, trying to carry too much alone. He smiled, this time more fully. "I didn't expect you to get it. I'm not as mysterious as I look," I laughed, nudging his knee with mine. He glanced down where our legs nearly touched, then back at me, slower this time. "You live here alone?" he asked. "No pets. Not since my old terrier passed 2 years ago. My daughter keeps asking me to get a cat, but I think she just wants me to have someone to talk to when she forgets to call." He chuckled. "I've got my brother, but he's more interested in racing bikes than returning phone calls. We were quiet again, but it felt easier now. Like we were two people remembering how to just be near someone without needing to perform. "Why'd you get divorced?" I asked before I could stop myself. He looked out toward the trees. "She wanted more. I couldn't figure out how to give it. I think." I shut down, and by the time I realized I missed her, she'd already moved on. I nodded. "Do you miss her?" I asked. "Sometimes, but not the marriage. I think I mostly miss having someone notice when I'm not okay." There it was again, that soft ache. "I think you're better at being seen than you give yourself credit for." His eyes found mine again. Longer this time, deeper. "You make it easy," he said. I felt that in my chest, the kind of compliment that wasn't about looks or charm. It was about presence, about mattering. The wind picked up, and I wrapped my arms around myself. Without a word, James stood, disappeared inside for a second, and returned with a throw blanket from my couch. He draped it around my shoulders, his hands brushing the side of my neck. The contact was brief, but enough to stop my breath. I looked up at him. He was still standing, just watching me with that same quiet honesty from the other night. "I don't want to mess this up," he said almost in a whisper. "You're not," I replied. "You're showing up. That's more than most." He sat beside me again, this time a little closer. I didn't lean into him. He didn't try to hold me, but we both felt the pull, the kind of gravity that built not from desperation, but from recognition. Two people with their own bruises sitting side by side, not trying to fix anything, just being there. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel too old or too late or too far past the chance for something meaningful. I just felt seen, and seen is where all the best things begin. There's a moment right before something changes when everything feels like it's holding its breath, like the air itself becomes heavier, slower, charged with something you can't quite name. That's how it felt the next night. He didn't call, didn't text, but just before 10 I saw the porch light flicker on from his place, then off, then on again. It was like a signal. I stood at my window for a minute longer than necessary, holding my tea. My fingers were trembling a little. I told myself it was the chill in the air, but we both knew it wasn't that. I walked over, slow, steady, knocked once. He opened the door almost immediately. James looked different. Not dressed up, not undone, just more awake. There was something behind his eyes, something open now, like he'd finally given himself permission to be present. "Hey," I said quietly. "Hey." He stepped aside to let me in. His place was neat, but empty. Not in the physical sense. There was furniture, a framed photo on the wall, even a candle burning on the coffee table, but it felt like a space that had never been lived in completely, like he'd been passing through it for years without ever unpacking his spirit. "I made coffee," he said. Didn't know if he'd want any. I'd love some. He poured 2 mugs, and we sat across from each other in the dim living room. The only light came from the small lamp beside the couch, casting long shadows that danced gently across the walls. I looked around. "You don't have much on the walls." He gave a soft chuckle. "I've been meaning to hang more, but never felt like it mattered." "Does it matter now?" His eyes met mine. "Yeah, I think it does." We sipped in silence for a moment. Outside, crickets hummed a slow, low chorus. Inside, it was just the two of us and the sound of things unspoken waiting to be said. "You know," I said, watching the rim of my cup, "I've spent a lot of years convincing myself I was fine being alone. Were you sometimes? But lately," I paused. "Lately, I've felt like I've been holding my breath for so long. I forgot what it's like to really exhale." He nodded slowly. "I know that feeling." I placed the mug down gently on the table. My hands were warm now, and I folded them into my lap, more to give them something to do than anything else. James leaned forward slightly. "I wasn't expecting you to come. I wasn't sure I would." "What made you?" I looked at him fully. I didn't want to wonder. That answer hung in the room like a thread, delicate and waiting to be pulled. He moved closer, just a little. but enough that I could feel the space between us tighten. I keep thinking about that night, he said softly. Not just the conversation, but how quiet it was, how safe it felt, like the world had finally stopped spinning. I whispered. I felt that too. His hand rested on the arm of the couch, just beside mine, not touching, but there. I haven't let anyone in like this for a long time, he admitted. Me either. I keep waiting to mess it up. You haven't. His voice dropped a little. But I want to be careful with you. Something in that broke me open in a way I didn't expect. I blinked against the warmth rising in my throat. No one had said that to me in years. Not be with you. Not want you, but be careful with you. That was something else, something truer. I'm not fragile, I said. He smiled faintly. I don't think you are. I just think you deserve gentle. That's silence again, but now it felt electric. I don't know who leaned in first. I don't remember if I closed my eyes or kept them open. But one moment we were looking at each other, and the next his forehead was resting against mine. No kiss, just that quiet, deliberate closeness. I like this, I whispered. Just this. Me too, he breathed. His hand finally found mine. Warm, steady, no rush. We stayed like that for a long time, just sitting, just breathing the same space. I think we were both afraid that if we moved too fast, the spell might break. And neither of us was ready for that. Eventually, I pulled back slightly. Looked at him. I should go, I said, gently. He didn't try to stop me. Okay. But he walked me to the door, and when I turned to say goodbye, he surprised me. Not with a kiss, but with a question. Can I see you again? Not just by chance, on purpose. I smiled. I'd like that. He nodded. His hand brushed mine again, slower this time. And then I walked home. Not because I didn't want to stay, but because something in me needed to remember this moment exactly as it was. Simple, real, honest. By the time I got back inside, I realized I was smiling without even noticing it. Not because anything grand had happened, but because for the first time in years, I had something to look forward to. Someone to look forward with. A week passed. Maybe 8 days. I lost count. It wasn't one of those whirlwind romances you read about in magazines, the kind where everything happens at once. No, this was slower, softer, a kind of unfolding that didn't ask for permission, just time. We started taking walks in the evenings. Sometimes we talk about nothing. Dogs we used to have favorite old diners that don't exist anymore. Childhood stories that made us laugh so hard we'd have to stop walking. Other times, we talked about the big stuff. Regrets. The years we wasted trying to be what others wanted. The long, quiet ache of loneliness that doesn't scream but settles into your bones. James had a habit of glancing at me when he thought I wasn't looking, like he was still trying to believe I was real. And sometimes I'd catch myself doing the same, watching him laugh or rub his neck in that slow, thoughtful way, and wondering how I ever missed him living 2 doors down all these years. One night, after one of our walks, he lingered on my porch a little longer than usual. The cicadas were loud that night, filling the warm August air with their rhythmic chorus. I've been thinking about something, he said, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. I leaned against the railing, hands tucked into the sleeves of my sweater. That sounds serious, he half smiled. Not serious, just honest. I stayed quiet. Let him find the words. I don't know what we're doing. I know what it feels like. It feels good, real, but I don't want to mess it up by rushing or assuming. I tilted my head. You're not rushing? We're exactly where we're meant to be. That seemed to ease something in him. His shoulders softened and he stepped a little closer. I just want to be clear, he said. I like you, not just as someone to pass time with. I look forward to you. I think about you more than I probably should. I felt the corners of my lips lift. That's a nice problem to have. I haven't done this in a long time, he admitted. And I'm not perfect. I might forget to call or say something awkward or shut down when I don't mean to. I'm not asking for perfect, James. I just want honest, real, present. He nodded, and for a moment we just stood there. The porch light cast a golden ring around us, and I could feel the warmth of him, even from a foot away. Then he reached for my hand, not out of impulse, not to prove anything, just because he wanted to. And I let him. That night, he didn't go home right away. We sat on my couch, legs brushing slightly, hands still linked. We talked until past midnight about things that didn't need to be profound to be meaningful. Grocery store annoyances, TV shows we'd both fallen asleep watching, the odd comfort of wearing the same sweatshirt 3 nights in a row. And when the conversation slowed, I didn't feel the urge to fill the silence, neither did he. At some point, I rested my head on his shoulder. He didn't shift or flinch, just adjusted his arm so I could settle in more comfortably. It wasn't romantic in the way we're taught to expect when we're young. There were no grand gestures or background music swelling, but in its own way, it was everything. Comfort, trust, peace. Later that week, we had dinner at my place. I made roasted chicken, the kind my mother used to make when she wanted to impress company. He brought wine and flowers, daisies in a slightly too tall vase. He told me he'd Googled flowers that don't mean too much too soon. I laughed so hard I nearly burned the carrots. After dinner, we sat on the porch again, our chairs close, feet touching. We watched the stars appear one by one until the sky became something vast and silent and full. Do you think this could really become something? He asked, voice soft. I think it already is, I replied. He looked over at me then. Are you scared? I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't know, but because I wanted to say it right. I'm scared of getting used to something this good only to lose it. But I'm more scared of not letting myself have it in the first place. His eyes didn't leave mine. Then let's just be here every day. No promises we can't keep. Just showing up. I nodded. That's enough, and it was. We never labeled it. We didn't need to. What we had was ours, defined not by declarations, but by presence. James didn't try to rescue me from my life. I didn't try to fix him. We just made space for the quiet, for the healing, for the slow joy of companionship that comes when you stop looking for the fire and start noticing the warmth. The funny thing is, it wasn't some explosive moment that changed everything. It was the collection of small ones. The way he remembered, I liked my coffee with honey, not sugar. The way I folded his sweatshirt and placed it on the back of the chair without needing to be asked. The way we both started sleeping with our windows cracked open at night, knowing the sound of crickets would now always remind us of each other. Some nights we still sit on the porch, watching the sky. We don't always talk. Sometimes we just exist beside one another, breathing in the same rhythm, grateful that life, however unexpectedly, brought us to this quiet, beautiful now. And when people ask me what happened that night when he knocked on my door, I tell them the truth. I wasn't ready. But maybe that's how all the best things start. Not when we're ready, but when we're willing. Willing to open the door. Willing to stay for a while.